is that necrotic affix, it becomes very problematic for your tank. So them either getting a bop, a Kyrian file reset, walking away from the mobs holding their S key, all very viable solutions for being able to deal with that. And it's ultimately going to come down to tank damage, especially on this first boss where Decia, she does not play around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it looks like the teams are ready to roll here for the first time ever between them. John's Army and Team Stiefbruders here in Theater of Pain.
All right, and now they're both gearing up for the first pull. That Bloodhorn and all of the trash being pulled into the first boss off both sides, and Bloodlust being committed by both teams as well.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit confused that the Bloodlust is already over for Team Stiefbruders. It seems that they pulled it quite early on before all of the mobs were together, but we did see Ashen Hollow come down for both of the Paladins and all of the DPS players using their cooldowns, and this is looking quite good so far. I don't want to jinx it, but the teams look like they can handle this pull in their first meeting here in Theater of Pain. There's still some spiteful shades that we need to deal with, so our players are running and kiting, pressing as they're walking away, like you just said beautifully. And yeah, Team Stiefbruders has already finished the trash. They're now trying to down Decia, since that is really the boss mob you want to focus here. After she is dead, you can pull that boss or clean that boss off smoothly and beautifully, and that is 13% to go for Team Stiefbruders, whereas John's Army is on 13% now. A little bit of a lead here for Team Stiefbruders.
Yeah, and the reason that you're going to have like a damage lead between these two teams on this kind of a fight is it depends on like the Pastern and the Sathel kicks. If you're able to get Pastern and Sathel grouped up a lot more quickly, then you're going to be able to just have more boss damage as a whole, which you would think that John's Army with the multiple ranged kicks would be able to get those mobs grouped up just a little bit quicker, but the Stiefbruders have been doing a great job, maybe off the back of that sub-rogue priority damage as well, getting Decia down faster. That could also be a part of it, but now the Stiefbruders have dealt with the first boss in this dungeon, Affront of Champions, and while John's Army does still have 20% remaining on Pastern by itself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a little bit unlucky that they're taking longer here to actually finish that pass run, but maybe they can make up for it. I'm quite interested to see where the teams are going to go next. Team Stiefbruders is already falling down, and I assume they will play Varuth down here together with some of the ghost mobs, as we've seen from other teams before, so just that they don't do like single mob gaming, right? You want to have a little bit of those shackled souls together with the executioner, and then you have a nice little pull together. And I think John's Army are going to go down and do exactly the same thing.
You saw K-Mage on John's Army side cheering as they down the first boss, and look at this, they're both grabbing that banner in Theater of Pain, that Necrolord banner, which gives a substantial amount of versatility. And John's Army is actually getting Executioner Varuth and these Shackled Souls grouped up a lot quicker than the side of the Stiefbruders. I think John's Army's composition is going to have a decent bit more AoE than the side of the Stiefbruders, but I think the Stiefbruders, their primary source of damage in their composition is going to be on the bosses. Bringing that Sub-Rogue, that's going to allow them to do a lot more damage on the bosses compared to something like that Frost Mage, and I think that may be an advantage, but it's just a difference in composition for both of these teams. It's really hard to analyze which is going to be better down the stretch. But now the Stiefbruders here are pulling Incinerator Arcaleth into this Portal Guardian. We saw them do this pull yesterday, and they executed it very clean whenever they were playing versus Incarnation. And I want to see if John's Army is also going to be able to pull off this pack as they are making their way down the bridge.
Yeah, I'm super confident both of those teams are going to deal with that pull just fine, since it is tyrannical, not fortified, so they shouldn't have too many problems with it. It's a little bit tricky here because you have the spiteful shades and you need to deal with them while also doing damage, but Team Stiefbruders are showing exactly how it's done, kiting slowly so the melees get uptime since they're very melee heavy, while John's Army is now following up on that. They started pulling the Incinerator earlier and only just now pulled the Portal Guardian in. so they might take a little bit longer here since they didn't get full damage uptime from the start. Team Stiefbruders is already on the next platform here, and what you said earlier, that they should have more single target damage, and you can't really say whether or not that's going to kind of pay off in the end, or which team will have the better comp. I do think it's smart that if you're running a tyrannical dungeon, and especially dungeon like Theater of Pain, where, for example, now you only have that one platform and you can't pull more onto it. So you're not allowed to have like those really big, juicy, big pulls. So it makes sense to actually go for a little bit more single target in my head, at least. Since it is tyrannical and you would want the damage there at most.
Yeah, I think that definitely does make sense as to like where you would want the damage allocation. On top of that, sub bringing a decent amount of priority damage for things like this Portal Guardian. I bet the Rogue there going to be pumping a large amount of damage into that Portal Guardian. The Stiefbruders ended up pulling this pack before their healer was even ready. Ooh, they were able to get through that first cast from that Portal Guardian without their healer. Jackson shambles as he realizes his innate value to his group, and Impy laughing as they all realize that we don't need additional healing. We are out here just fine by ourselves.
I mean, to be fair, in the current meta, healers are a little bit more, it's like the Holy Paladin has this feature called healing, but they're doing damage, right? Like it is true. Like, the healers are mostly doing damage, and only when like spicy situations occur, they're holding out a hand to save their team. But the focus is definitely not like it would be in earlier X packs, where you're getting a lot more throughput on healing.
Oh, tell me more about healer's jobs, please. Insult more people. I want to hear it.
I'm not insulting people. I used to be a healer. Like.
All right.
Yeah.
So Team Stiefbruders here are now dealing with this Bone Reaver. So one of the disadvantages of like having that low AoE composition that we talked about is the inability to be able to pull all of the Bone Mages at once on this pack. I'm interested to see if John's army is going to be able to get all 6 of these Bone Mages pulled at the exact same time. It looks like they're also going for the more safe strat of pulling 4 on top of this Bone Reaver as opposed to doing 6. I think that part of it too is the it's the Prot Warrior versus like a Vengeance Demon Hunter in this situation, because Vengeance Demon Hunter would provide like that Sigil of Silence, but since it is one, a Theater of Pain, and it is 2, Necrotic, that Dwarf Protection Warrior playing Kyrian, that's a lot of stops and just flat mitigation from physical attacks that tank brings. So maybe that's the reason. Ultimately, it's hard to say whether or not even pulling 6 mages at that point is even faster, or whether you would just take that Bone Reaver around and kill it off with all of the mages.
Yeah, you also have to keep in mind that we only have 2 melee kicks on John's army, with Mage and Penguin being on. I mean, Hunter has a short kick, but still, you need to kind of be aware of how many interrupts can you actually handle. If you're pulling 6 of those Bone Mages, that's a lot to interrupt, and if you don't have the CC and the kicks to actually do it, you might be better off going smaller instead of getting all that extra damage coming in on your team.
Yep, and now the Stiefbruders here are pulling some more of those Shackled Souls into Koltha Rock. This is a really good pull for the Stiefbruders, especially with how many Shackled Souls they got. They can end up having, they have that like target capped kind of melee squad where a lot of their value is on that 5 target number, and so now you do see those Shackled Souls. They only had 4 of them, or they only had 3 Shackled Souls with Koltha Rock, so 4 targets in total. They were able to nuke down those Shackled Souls, and on top of that, they get a lot of priority damage for that sub-rogue onto the boss. It's really not to be understated how much damage they're going to be doing to Koltha Rock, because you may look at the damage meter and believe, okay, so Impy is doing an insane amount of overall damage and is helping kill off those Shackled Souls, but if you turn the damage meter to boss damage, you would truly see the value of that sub-rogue, because most of that 13k is probably going to end up being straight into the boss. And now John's army has also made it to Koltha Rock. They were somewhere in the range of 50-ish% behind on this boss currently.
Absolutely, and they still need to do the Shackled Souls that Team Stiefbruders did so beautifully. And I think it's really important to kind of capitalize a little bit on the AoE cap thing that you just mentioned. Because with classes like that, you really need to keep that in mind. Even though you might want to pull really big, and try to AoE down everything, that's not really beneficial if you can only put damage on 3 or 4 or maybe even 6 targets out of 10. So you need to keep that in mind, and sometimes it's better to do like 2 smaller pulls and spread your cooldowns out. So one of the damage dealers, maybe the Holy Paladin, pulls their cooldowns on the first of those 2 pulls, whereas the other 2 DPS do the second of the mob pull, and then you get through quicker than what you would have done if you had 10 and not the AoE cap. And
Yeah,
the
and
AoE cap.
it's also important that they don't want to pull 2 specifically, because that's also pretty bad for their composition, because Hunter's AoE doesn't even start until you reach that 3 target number. So it does really make a pretty big difference as to how many targets you're going to be pulling like that. And now the Stiefbruders have down Cold Rock. They're looking to go towards that Gore Chop wing. We do know that MP yesterday pulled off that Gore Chop snap with great precision, was able to get all of his group mates teleported down there. And look at this here. From the Stiefbruders, they are shrouding. They're going to be shrouding into the middle of this room to be able to just get this pull set up a little bit easier. Because whenever you're trying to pull from back to front with this kind of pack, with all these sludge spewers that you're getting in, especially if you're getting in this bridge pack that MP MD'd onto his tank, this can be very problematic for interrupts and just all of these mobs leaping out. So they need to make sure that they're getting kicks as frequently as possible, and they want the pack to be as stacked up as it reasonably can be.
Absolutely, and with this pack, it's so important to actually interrupt all of the withering discharges, and they're doing a great job so far. We had one of the shield casts going through quite a lot, like the meat shield. You can also interrupt that, so the mob doesn't gain a big shield on top of that. We had one of those go through, but that is one person down. Right here that hurt a lot, but other than that, they were able to kill this bull very, very quickly. I'm quite impressed, I have to say. Beautifully done by Team Stiefbruders.
And look at that, Impy ends up feign deathing off all of that trash. He doesn't want any of those mobs on him. And he leaves a little bit early inside of Camouflage. He has to pop his invisibility potion, otherwise all of those sludge spewers will aggro to him. And so now he's going to summon a pet here. And so you do see him summoning that beetle. He's going to MD the beetle, pull all the trash from the outside, that butcher. Ooh, and that horror. Okay, the horror has been MD'd to that beetle as well, and so now he ends up using a binding shot to get that butcher and that horror further away from him. He pops his turtle as he has to tank the first hateful strike from Gorechop, and now Gorechop is going to grip the remainder of his party into this area, like you see on screen right there. The bop comes out, and now the Stiefbruders have done it. They have absolutely executed this pull perfectly, and they do have their Bloodlust available. I wonder where they're going to use it, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they wouldn't use it here, since it is tyrannical, and you probably want to have it back up for the last boss. So maybe they're just waiting for cooldowns. Ashen Hollow is another 8 seconds, so they might just pop it a little late. Right now we have Sec running. Cap is struggling a little bit. We still have the Butcher that we have to deal with, and another Spiteful Shade. So there's a lot of damage coming in at the moment, but man, that pull was beautiful. That's exactly what we wanted to see.
Cap almost didn't get a reset on his necrotic there, and just at the last moment, I think the Windwalker monk taunted Gorechop off of Cap and was able to get him a reset. He was sitting at like 25 stacks of necrotic, which is very dangerous. And on the side of John's army, it looks like John Warrior going and invis potioning through, and he's going to be solo tanking Gorechop. It's interesting that they're sending the tank, because we've seen mages do it so far. We've also seen hunters do this snap, but we've never seen somebody send the tank. And now John from John's army. Ooh! And Penguin goes down almost immediately as that Bloodlust is popped, as they get snapped through. That's so bad for them. They should be able to get him back up, but that's going to be a lot of damage that's going to be lost due to the fact that he does lose his Bloodlust. He hasn't popped that True Shot or that Resonating Arrow, so it's not the end of the world ultimately, but it's definitely not a good situation for them.
Absolutely not. That is so painful. You get the group there. It went pretty good. You know, John was stable. They all poured it down. They popped Bloodlust, and immediately Penguin died. So that is definitely not something you want to see. Losing uptime on that Bloodlust, you need to cast that Res. So that's another player that is losing uptime on Bloodlust. Whereas Team Stiefbruders actually made good of their time. They're now porting up after they finished Gorechop beautifully here, going to the next mob, and they're actually still haven't used their Bloodlust. Do you think
Yeah,
they're
so-
going to use it on the next boss?
I think it may be used on the last boss. Is where I would have to guess that it's going to be used. Holding it for a long time is not great, but it is a 20 tyrannical. So and at this 252 gear level, they can make fairly quick work of Theater of Pain. We saw yesterday whenever they were playing versus Incarnation. Some of the pulls that they do in this Zav wing are really dangerous. Like they pulled double champions together at least at some point. And they pulled all of the Arbalist with one of those champions as well. Very dangerous pulls that you probably should not try at home. And now you see the Stiefbruders here, like right on cue. They have those two mobs together. They have the Battle Axe, Bleed, and then they also have the Interrupting Roar guy. And this is an insane amount of tank damage. Ooh, Impy with the turtle there, being able to dodge away from that Bleed, from that Battle Axe. This is actually a really good job. And now they just have to dodge out of the way of these Spiteful Shades and 2-target cleave this whole entire pack down.
Yeah, and Cat really has to pay attention to his stacks. He still have the Dwarf Racial ready if he wants to use it, but for now, it just seems like he will kite a little bit, whereas John's army has now finished Core Chop and they're moving on, and I just have to say I love how much fun they're having. It looks like they're having the time of their lives here in that Theater of Pain. I'm really, really excited to see that, and Cap has actually reset it without using that Dwarf Racial. Very, very nice, and we're now going to pull everything together here behind that little bone.
Yep, and you do see on the corner they have a mob CC'd off to the side as they pull all those Arbalists and conscripts into this pack. And this is a point that caused them some issues yesterday. I think they had a couple of deaths to this pack. They ultimately there was a wipe on a Sagadon pull into Zav, but that pull was dealt with almost perfectly by the Stiefbruders. I'm interested to see what John's army is going to be doing and if they are going to be doing something similar. Right now you do see their Windwalker Monk grabbing that Necro Lord banner as they are looking to gear up and pull two of these champions into one another. Ooh, they got the exact same champions as the side of the Stiefbruders. And I mean, this is a lot of tank damage like you appropriately assessed earlier. And so making sure that John can get his necrotic reset or just not stack it up too high here, that's an important thing, and they are trying to kill off that first champion that they ended up pulling, so then they are able to pull that patrol into this pack.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very curious to see if we see the Bloodlust on John's army coming up at the last boss again, or if it was smart from Team Stiefbruders to actually hold on to it, since they will be fast enough up again. Yeah, so that will be something I'll look out for in the next couple of minutes, since Team Stiefbruders is now moving on to the next boss, and John's army should follow suit in just a little bit.
All right, and so now the Stiefbruders here going into Zav. This is the boss that caused them a lot of issues yesterday. Like I said earlier, they accidentally ended up pulling Sagadon, but right now they're having an absolutely great run. Only one death on their side. They are at that 98% enemy forces mark, and you see that freezing trap has been pre-placed to be able to make sure that this mob does get CC'd whenever it does come in. Ooh, they even use a para for redundant CCs to make sure that it really does not get pulled into the boss, because they don't want to be fighting it with the boss. They want to pull it after the like whenever they kill Zav and they're able to go activate the RP for Mordretha, that is the time where they would like to fight that one mob and deal with the remainder of their trash count. And on the side of John's army, they're making quick work here. They are also in prime position to be able to capitalize on a Stiefbruders mistake if anything happens there.
Yeah, but they still need a little bit of trash count, right? So Team Stiefbruders is on 98, and they still have that paralyzed mob back there. Oh, and John's army is now also at 98. I didn't think that would give them the count, but maybe I didn't see something there that they had.
Yeah, they were fighting Wreck still. They were still fighting that one of those mini bosses. And it looks like the Stiefbruders here have dealt with their first PvP duel, and Sagadon has not been pulled, notably.
Perfect. That's exactly what you want to see. However, it's really important with this boss that when we have the mob coming in here. That's
nice
not
drop.
what we wanted. We put him in the ice trap, and that should suffice for now. Hopefully they can kill off Zav quickly enough so that they don't get into trouble with that mob again. However, it's going to be important where Zav does his combo, like in what direction, because they need to dodge, and if they need to dodge in the direction of the mob, that might get them another pull, but it looks like they can do it here.
Yeah, and John's Army, whenever they go down for their first PvP duel as well, they also notably do not pull Sagadon. They were in perfect position to make sure that that mini-boss does not get pulled. And now the Stiefbruders here, unfortunately, get one additional PvP phase, and they're not going to get pulled up to that portal, so you see them actually portaling back up instead of running towards the Mordretha area because they have to kill off this Ancient Captain. And then they're going to send one of their players. It looks like... Okay, so it looks like it was their Windwalker monk that they've sent to go and start that Mordretha RP. And
yep.
I think their rogue came back upstairs to deal with this captain. And that Mordretha RP, it ends up taking somewhere in the range of like 45 seconds. So it makes a lot of sense that you're sending somebody early. And now the Stiefbruders are making their way towards that final boss. Look at the difference in Bloodlust timing, though, that we were talking about. John's Army notably popped it on that Gorechop pull that you talked about. And the Stiefbruders have been saving it for a long time. However, it looks like John's Army's Lust is not going to be up for the final boss.
Well, usually you would want to lust the last boss on the second phase. And
Sure.
I think for John's Army, the way that they're playing it and the way they have their damage kind of spread out, it should get back up again exactly for that timing, if I'm not mistaken. So they still have to finish that, and they have to trigger that RP and finish off the captain in the background that's now just casting, and that's not good for John's Army. They did get the trap back on, but Sankey and Penguin died here, and the problem is the boss will cast another of the dual things very soon, so they had to rest back up on Sankey. Boss is now that someone is going to run and trigger that RP. Mark my words, they will get that Bloodlust ready again for phase 2 of Mordretha.
But it may be too little too late, as the Stiefbruders have already pushed the boss to 50%. They popped their Lust on pull, and then they have that Ashen Hollow ticking down almost at 20 seconds remaining. And I think that once that Ashen goes down, the boss's health is going to dip very rapidly, as that is an incredibly powerful cooldown on single target. So they just need to make sure that they're dodging these charges from Mordretha. Don't get hit by the frontal. A few more seconds for that Ashen Hollow. You even see that resonating arrow being cast, and the portal is right on top of the group as you see Cap immediately leaping away. Please do not get hit by that clash. Ooh, and the Stiefbruders, that was a really scary point for them, but they're able to get out of the way of danger very quickly, doing a great job here. This Ashen Hollow is going to be casted the moment that their healers can get back in the melee range, and Mordretha dipping increasingly low at 20% HP as John's Army has engaged Mordretha. If the Stiefbruders have a full wipe, John's Army would be in position to capitalize on this, but it almost feels too little too late as Mordretha is dipping increasingly lower.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. There's only 5% left on Mordretha, and John's Army has another 10-second death timer on top. And that was a really scary charge there at the end, but Team Stiefbruders managed to finish off the Theater of Pain here 1-0 in their first match of the day. And remember, whoever wins gets to move on into the next round, whereas the team that loses here today will actually be eliminated from this tournament.
Team Stiefbruders taking the victory here in Theater of Pain. You can just see Impy just very pleased with his team's performance on that one, Zyro, as you know they try to play it as clean as they possibly could, making sure they're avoiding any sort of unnecessary deaths.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're just kind of continuing what they started off yesterday, just having relatively good-looking, clean, solid runs. And I don't want to focus on them, only them either, because John's Army was probably the shakiest team that we saw yesterday, with the most deaths in the run outside of that one Necrotic Wake. But they cleaned it up and looked very, very good today. And on top of that, you remember, have to consider they have a replacement healer who just kind of had to come in and say, okay, guys, I'll drop Ashen when you tell me to. And that's really probably all they could do with him up to this point. They might have had a couple hours of practice, but still, on such short notice to play that well and have a relatively clean run is really impressive from John's Army.
That's right, and it's always so stressful as well when, you know, you have a tank and healer relationship that you're working on together and working to, you know, improve that sort of synergy, and then everything kind of gets tossed out the window right before game day on that one. So, you know, good on John's Army to make sure they're going to be staying in the hunt on this one, and the dungeon's going to keep on getting very challenging because, you know, after this theater and everything settles, there's Spires of Ascension they have to worry about.
Yeah, and Spires of Ascension this week, it's not the worst Spires that we've seen. We've seen some pretty bad ones. However, this one is a 19 on Fortified Raging, and so that can cause some problems. We've seen some teams bring soothes, some teams elect to not run any soothes, and the Angels in particular can become very problematic. Same with the Hellions. Both of those mobs do a lot of AoE ambient damage that if you don't end up getting the Enrage Dispel on those mobs, it is really, really scary. So yeah, look at that 19 Spires of Ascension. It is explosive, which we've seen a lot of DPS players run that Signet of Bolstering power, which gives you 3% additional damage every single time you kill an explosive orb. So that's a pretty good power, all things considered. But it's a 19 Spires of Ascension, and it should be a fast dungeon, but it's one that if there are mistakes, you're going to have basically a full team wipe if you're not careful.
Yeah, and especially in this lower bracket as well here, makes we've seen too many times where people have their cooldowns assigned for specific moments, especially with something along the lines of Spires where they're trying to be able to pull off some absolutely ridiculous pulls. We saw, for example, just after the first boss, people pulling left and right side, getting all the cats together as well as all of the hunters and ether worms and everything that they have all on top of each other. And if you don't have everything that you need there, it just makes it so much harder to be able to recover and bounce back.
Absolutely. And that is not the only scary pull in that dungeon, right?
Yeah.
Kettle's already mentioned the Hellions. Then we have the 3 Angel Brothers in front of the last boss. There are a lot of very, very big scary pulls that you can do here. And I just really hope the teams thought out which ones they want to participate in and where they just want to play it safe and make sure they get the mobs down clean. So that will be something we'll be definitely looking out for, and I'm very excited for what they have in store for us.
Yeah, this is also going to be really important as well, Zyro, because Spires in particular is also going to be featured in the following matchup. So whoever wins in this series goes up against Reload Esports, and they also have to play in Spires as well. So this has to be like a priority dungeon for both teams.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting a little bit of overtime, right? That's what the takeaway is here. So it's going to be a rough one for sure. Reload Esports is looking incredibly good after their match against Echo, but I mean, I'm kind of surprised. Like, I feel like honestly there might be a little bit of an advantage here, unironically, for John's army, right? They looked pretty good in that theater, and if they were able to get a little bit of practice in, especially after watching the Spires from Echo earlier today, I feel like maybe they could turn this around and take a game off of Stiefbruders here.
So,
Yeah,
what do you think would be the biggest thing, though, that would help them by watching the Echo match from earlier today?
Just being able to put together with a new player on your team, whether or not you could run your old strategy versus just running an entirely new strategy, I feel like it doesn't make that much of a difference, right? So if their strategy is already better and you get practice time with the new strategy, maybe just having someone with a new mindset that isn't like shackled to pressing their buttons in the old strategy could help a little bit. I'm kind of grasping at straws here.
I think that's a fair
That's
point
fair.
because what's made some of the best teams just in general in the MDI have been the willingness to be more flexible and the willingness to try out new things. And I think most importantly, we've seen as well titles in a lot of previous MDIs where, especially if it go over multiple days or multiple weeks or anything, teams would jump at the chance to be able to steal another team's strategies and implement them for themselves.
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest differentials between a lot of the Spires of Ascension runs is like how many Kyrians you're bringing to a group, whether or not you're bringing one or two, and like where you're using both of those arrows. Because like if you only bring one Kyrian, you have to commit it before you get to that second spear location, because you're not able to carry 2 spears at once. So I think it just makes a difference in like what comp you see. So we've seen a lot of Kyrian Hunters. We've seen a lot of Kyrian Vengeance Demon Hunters. Both of those are very popular. But if you don't want to run a Hunter in Spires of Ascension, I think that also makes a difference in your composition just a little bit. And we do know the Stiefbruders have been playing a Hunter a lot. And so I'm interested to see like both where they're going to use their Kyrian arrow, what they're going to use it on, where they've addressed and like assessed as the most dangerous points in this dungeon, and like where do both of these teams feel like they can save the most amount of time. I think that's going to be the biggest deal for both of these sides.
Yeah, and we even saw, for example, out of Omega Pump, putting in some very inventive and creative strategies, grabbing Ophirion, for example, in this room and bringing it down into other pulls and starting to combine them that way. And that's something that, a lot of teams, especially a lot of the best teams in the world, are able to do to such great effect, is start bringing a lot of these pulls in together and shortening them as best as they possibly can without bringing on too terribly much risk. So let's see what these teams have in store for us as John's army is facing elimination as we enter Spires of Ascension.
Absolutely, and both of those teams seem to be running two very similar cons here. We have the Vengeance Demon Hunter, we have the Holy Paladin that we've now seen quite some time. One of them is using Ashen Hollow. Fudgego did not use it yet, and the only difference there seems to be between those teams is the Mage versus the Rogue, and that's actually something for John's army that's happening right there. Okay, Mage has popped that Night Phase Seed, saving her from death, and Penguin has died, I think, due to standing in the frontal there. At least from experience, I can say those frontals are a little bit dangerous.
Can't relate. All right, the Stiefbruders are also having some problems. They pop their Lust on this pack as opposed to popping the Ashen Hollow. It's just a little bit difference of where they're committing their CDs, like Ashen versus Bloodlust is a very common trade between these two teams. And Stiefbruders and John's army end up killing that first pull at almost virtually identical times, even though John's army had a death on the board and a mage and a seed. And so now John's army, is going to start Incinerator by itself. This is, honestly, I really don't hate this. I don't mind playing
hate
it.
this at all. This pull always gets me so scared because we've seen teams who actually decided to pull the Incinerator, pull all of the trash, and then pull the boss together into a big, giant mess of a pull, and so often things go wrong there. So I actually prefer them to go a little bit smaller here, maybe just finish up on the Incinerator, get that Anima power, and then do the bigger pull. But Cap has heard me and decided to, just go in, show me they can do it. They're actually pulling all of the mobs together with the Incinerator now that Arkaleth is nearly down, whereas John's army is finishing up on their Incinerator and will now move on to the Trash Pull. I'm curious to see if they will pull it together with the boss.
And the Stiefbruders healer has gone down, and now Cap is frantically kiting as they're trying to get that engineering battle res onto their healer. And this is not looking great for the Stiefbruders. Okay, so now the healer has been rezzed up, and now Cap is being healed just a little bit. And on the side of John's army, this is the time that they needed to be able to take an advantage with their first pull. They're pulling all of the trash onto the first boss here inside of Spires of Ascension, making sure that they get kicks on the Castigator, making sure that they get kicks on those Goliaths. Those are the things that are forced to get kicks, and John's army, with their Lust, is doing it.
Absolutely. So definitely here something, that I was saying earlier, that pull is so scary, and it cost them a healer death, it cost them so much time just here and now, whereas John's army finished up on that Incinerator. They then decided to pull the trash together with the boss, use Bloodlust, pull everything together and just nuke it. Beautifully done here on the side of John's army, and Team Stiefbruders is trying to catch up. They're actually dishing out really, really good damage here and are catching up to John's army here. Definitely the Ashen that has been held on to.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the difference in the damage. You do see the Stiefbruders Holy Paladin at 13k DPS, where John's army's Holy Paladin's at 5.5k. It's just a difference of where it was committed. And, of course, John's army did have that Lust on pull, but a lot of that Lust wasn't going into the boss. A lot of that Lust was going into the killing off the trash. And John's army having people dip incredibly low there.
So scared.
That was very scary, as both their tank and their healer hit 15% HP.
Yeah, absolutely. So John was actually on low HP for quite some time, and I was already scared that he would not make it, but he has meta ready and his meta proc ready, so he should be safe. But then Sankey dropped really, really hard with no defensive left that they could use, so that was definitely scary there for a moment, but they managed to finish up that boss a little bit earlier than their competitors. Team Stiefbruders now are trying to set up the next pull, and I'm curious to see what they will pull. It seems like John's army has decided to go for the cats, but not after getting, a refreshing treat at the table of I don't know, dinner. You're hungry.
The RP for John's army, very strong, as they had to take a seat. He said, all gather around the table, watch John group up these mobs, and now it's unfortunate because John's army doesn't have that Praetor stacked inside of that pack. They're killing off all of these Stealth Claws, which are by far the most dangerous part. But for the Stiefbruders, they do have all of those mobs grouped up, and as the Raging comes out, that Ring of Peace happens, and it looks like the Stiefbruders are going to start catching up and even passing John's army off the back of that. But John's army ended up grabbing some of these Ether Divers and mobs from the other side.
Say, they decided to not only play the cats, but also get some of these Ether Divers, and they're now having to finish them off and then play that Skirmisher. And I think they finished up on that Praetor as well. At least I couldn't spy it just there for a second. I think
Bless
they
you,
already
okay,
managed to do that. And Team Stiefbruders has moved on to the next poll, but that's definitely some extra trash percentage that John's army is collecting here that they can skip later on. So I'm very curious to see how different the routes of the teams are here in that Sparse Ascension. We've seen some different routes before. We have seen some very, very scary Hellion polls from teams that didn't do trash after the first boss. And right now, Cap is in a little bit of trouble since he's kiting 2 of those Enraged Goliaths, but it should go all down smoothly. They were only finishing up on that Praetor, whereas John's army is just now running in and pulling that big Goliath pull.
Yeah, and the Stiefbruders comp, they do have 2 soothes coming out of that Rogue and that Hunter, being able to get those mobs off, soothed off. And now John's army, here's their second Ashen Hollow of the dungeon. They're dropping on this Goliath. I actually really like this Ashen Hollow, just where the innate value of this is. And they have all of their Praetors and all of these other mobs grouped up. And immediately you see that Frost Nova to try to make sure that these other Praetors are going to be able to be stacked. They could also elect to use a Binding Shot. Procking it would be pretty difficult. Ooh, and here comes the Ring of Peace as well to continue to keep these mobs grouped up. Ooh, and John's army has a Rebellious Fist goes off, and the Windwalker Monk on their side has died. Oh no.
Yeah, that was really unfortunate there. That pull looked so clean. I was super rooting for them. And then that went through. John super low will die here. Can they manage to finish at least some of the mobs here? That will be really, really difficult for them. Sankey down. Okay, Mage in the pot. Maybe just a Praetor if Penguin can manage. There's Turtle. They're trying to save everything they can while the rest of the team is running there to help their fighting teammate. That is Feign Death. And then again the pull to keep them in fight. Ice Block. They're trying everything. Penguin down, but here comes John and gets them back. Wow, what a teamwork to actually keep the Goliaths there until John can finally manage to catch back up with his team. Man, oh man, what a pull.
Yeah, and you can actually outrange the Rebellious Fist. It's like something like 30 yards, but whenever the mobs are like actively running at you, it's very difficult to be able to maintain that amount of threat. And on the right side of the screen, you see the Stiefbruders not having any problems, and John's army has an enraged Rebellious Fist go off, and it's killed everybody off except for John. And more problems happen for them, while the Stiefbruders capitalizing on their failure and continuing to progress through the dungeon. They did a great job in their double pull with that spear and using stuff like that. They were doing it a little bit slower. I didn't see if they committed that Kyrian spear, but I did know that they broke it up into 2 separate packs. And so that's just something that they are doing. Ooh, and now they're shrouding past this squad leader pull. We've seen some teams pull this squad leader pack. I'm not a big fan, but now the Stiefbruders have engaged Ventanax. They hear my pleas, and they've dropped Ashen Hollow. And John's army, both of these Goliaths are sitting in a recharge anima phase, and this is a pull that's lasted a very long time for them. They finally are able to get it down.
Finally managed to finish it up, but they collected so many deaths on their way there. They are now on 10 deaths. That means another 50 seconds on top of their time. That's really, really unfortunate for them. I'm hoping they can manage to kind of get that time somewhere else, but it will require them to actually do like more, I would say brave pulls like the one before. We see one really, really big pull here, but I think one of the mobs is outside of the spear. They knocked it in with the Ring of Peace here beautifully. And now they're just finishing up on that pull here. At least that was really, really quick, and now they can probably also move on to Venturex, which Team Stiefbruders are already nearly finished with. So they put they pumped Ashen Hollow, they did everything they had, and they nuked that boss, and are now taking the Angel mid-flight.
Easy. Easy. And now everybody tabbing out of their window, checking their Spotify playlist, making sure that their music is the appropriate speed that they want to. And they have a nice 45-second intermission.
Who adjusts speed on their music? What?
I said they get the nice kind of music, that maybe some more up-tempo stuff as they're about to engage a Hellion here, you know? You need something, some nice ambiance. It's really hard to see. John's Army, you see OK Mage, she's got some nice,
she's
got
vibing.
some nice music on too as she's vibing. Yes, exactly, you see?
Look at her. She's having the
Fist
best
bumps
time of her
even.
life. I love that. For a second, I thought you were saying there's like a setting in Spotify, you know, to like do 1.5 speed on music. I was like, tell us, do you really do that? But yeah, Team Stiefbruders are now skipping that one very scary Hellion pull that we've seen before. They will move on here, and I'm curious to see what they will pull. Tetsuo is waiting here, and it looks like they will pull that. Yeah, exactly. So they will go in here with that Goliath and the Jessicars, and they will pull it together with the other pack there. So a lot of wardens that they definitely need to keep interrupted, and that Goliath. And here comes the spear, so they should be good here. A lot of damage coming in on Team Stiefbruders. They now need to be careful since all of the mobs are now enraged, but they did that beautifully. Goliath goes down for them, and they move on to the next pack, whereas John's army is nearly on 50% of Ventunax and should be finishing up that boss quickly and in time soon enough.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for the Stiefbruders wasn't that they skipped the Hellion pull. It was more that they skipped Executioner Baruth. We've seen a lot of groups kill off Executioner Baruth. Some teams have been playing 3 Tormented mobs with the last boss, but it just comes down to like where your routing is going to be, what you think you can do with that second Kyrian Spear, like where you think you can get a lot of your percent. And the Stiefbruders electing to play 3 Tormented mobs with the final boss, that's going to be very dangerous because of how how the AoE damage on that fight works.
Absolutely, and I think it's also very scary to have a Rifrion with 3 Tormented mobs. I don't think the last boss is that bad in Spires of Ascension. I think it's the pull before that we usually look out for, but often Rifrion is kind of neglected because people think, yeah, okay, there are some orbs and you have to soak them, but that boss actually hurts tanks a lot. So that will definitely be something to look out for Team Stiefbruders now that they didn't do the Executioner here, and they will maybe get in a little bit of trouble there, but I'm positive they can manage it. So far, only 1 death on their counter, and John's army is catching up to them.
Yeah, the Stiefbruders were playing this middle section before Ophirion a little bit slower than we've seen from some of the top teams. It's not necessarily a bad position for them to be in here since they are a decent bit ahead of John's army, but they are pulling a lot more slow and steady, I would say. They're doing some packs, like a lot of teams, if they're committing their Kyrian Spear there, they'll do all of that trash at once and just try to burn it down. I think the next big thing for me is, where is their Holy Paladin going to use their Ashen Hollow though? Are they going to use it on a Rifrion? Are they going to use it to be able to push that boss in one phase, or are they going to save it for the Angels? Because, I mean, it is really dangerous, but Orifrion, if you're not able to one-phase it during that vulnerability window, then it could be a fairly large time save if you commit your Ashen here.
That is true, but I don't think the boss fight will take 3 minutes or longer here. I mean,
True.
You still have to account for the way that they fly up, and that's actually a really long way when you think about it. So the time that they're traveling. Team Stiefbruders has enough trash count to actually go up right after Rifrion, so I don't think we will see the Ashen Hollow here. I think they will definitely use that for the 3 Angels on top. They will try to burst Rifrion in one phase here, but I think even if they don't quite make it, it'll still be the smart choice to not use the Ashen Hollow here, but save it for later on, since I don't think it will be ready again.
Yeah, so one of the things that some other of the MDI teams have been doing is they've been pulling some of the trash into the last little bit of Orifrion. and that forces you to have like split damage. Where the Stiefbruders here, ooh, they do actually end up committing their Ashen Hollow. They're all hitting the boss. It's just so easy. Whenever you're this smart like me, you know exactly what the Stiefbruders are gonna do. And so now they're gonna get an additional Ashen Hollow on the last boss. But the downside is that they just don't have it on the Angels. John's army have also committed an Ashen Hollow inside of this Kyrian arrow. Look at this. The Stiefbruders one-phase the boss. They absolutely clocked Orifrion. And now they only have to deal with the triple angel pull. They could even pull 2 and then 1 if they wanted to. It's not too bad.
You not? Is it what? That's actually such a It's fortified raging. Are you kidding me?
Well,
it's
whatever your elite
really,
gamers like the
really hard for
Stiefbruders.
them. They don't have Bloodlust. They don't have Ashen Hollow. If they do a 3 angel pull, I might fall off my chair. I don't think we will see that here.
Please do it. Save me.
They should definitely split them up. It will be so scary if they decide to do all 3 of the angels here. Please,
I believe in the
don't do
Stiefbruder
that.
supremacy. I believe that they got this. There's absolutely no way they can wipe.
Can you not jinx it? I'm actually so scared right now. They're just looking at them. Please don't pull all 3 of them. Please don't do it.
Oh, pain. They're only pulling 2. I wish I wish they would have committed to 3. That would have been epic.
That would have been so scary. No Bloodlust, no Ashen Hallow. That would have been a very, very brave pull, and I don't think any of the teams in the MDI would have been able to make that. Like, I'm not bad-talking the Stiefbruders, but that is a really, really tough pull if you want to do it without Bloodlust and Ashen Hollow. So they are doing 2 of the angels, and that is going down quite smoothly, and they're going in the direction of the 3rd one, and they're actually very close already. Keep in mind that you have to kill them at the same time, otherwise they will heal back up, and that's big trouble. So best we stay a little away from Klotos just now, while we finish up on those 2.
It's actually really hard to pull those mobs out of the air. I think you have to be like almost underneath them to like body pull them. Oh, and the Stiefbruders healer goes down. Oh no, that's really bad because now these mobs are both enraged.
They're actually casting that battle res back there, and it's going through very good. Healer is back up, but now they need to watch their feet. We still have those spears going off, and they're doing so much damage. The 2 mobs are nearly down, but John's army is catching up. You just use Bloodlust on Orifrion, and they're doing exactly what you said earlier. They're pulling in extra mobs into Orifrion at the very end so that they get that trash count. They're now at 88%, so they can go up after that boss as well. But they won't have Bloodlust, and maybe they will have Ashen Hallow, depending on how long they take for Orifrion, but I don't think it will be ready.
Yeah, so now the Stiefbruders have pulled Klotos, the most dangerous of angels. She does have all 3 of those debuffs now on her as well. She has those arrows that she fires out at the group, and in addition to that, she has a dot that she's stacking up on the party while also making them take increased damage. This is a very dangerous mob. It's been nerfed a couple times this expansion, and while it is fortified raging, they do have multiple soothes, so it shouldn't be too bad. They're going to get a enrage yourself. Please dispel. There we go.
Yeah.
It's fine. And so now the Stiefbruders deal with Klotos they make pretty quick work of it. Not too bad, all things considered. And now they just have Devos with 3 tormented mobs, 3 tormented debuffs to deal with. That's going to be very dangerous. This is the position where John's army could absolutely come back, as if the Stiefbruders make a mistake on Devos. Playing it with 3 tormented debuffs is, I mean, it can absolutely cost you that Execution of Ruth 50% heal reduction. We've seen it time and time again, cost teams just a few deaths here and there, and it could absolutely wipe the Stiefbruders if they don't play to perfection. They've had a really good run thus far. It would be a shame if they had a wipe here.
I mean, to be fair, it is fortified and not tyrannical, so keep that in mind. It shouldn't be too hard to actually play this boss with the debuffs if you move a little bit preventive instead of reactive. So, you know, you see where she's charging. She's usually charging on top of players. You can spread out in the intermission so that you're covering all of the orb spawns, and I think they should be able to manage just fine if they just move together as a team, and it seems like they've done that quite some times before, and it's all practiced and very well played so far. She should go into phase quickly enough. There's another run through coming, but they are dodging that, and that should be first intermission just now when they face the boss. Here it is. And actually something that I'm always anxious for in the MDI is the chance that one of the teams misses as a spear, because then suddenly it becomes a whole different story, right? One phase of carrying orbs and using that spear is easy enough, but a second one, usually more debuffs, more healing requirements, and so on. But Team Stiefbruders said, not with me. However, John's army at that time, losing 2 players on that 2 angel pull, they're now back up. Before they kill Klotos, they have to wait for those players. I think they've released, so right now they have to wait for them to fly up. And then they can also try and pull Klotos to catch up with Team Stiefbruders, who are already very far into that boss fight and are now phasing into the second intermission.
Yeah, okay, Mage hit us with the ASCII shrug emote there for a second. And the Stiefbruders, yeah, like you said, have entered the second intermission. From here on out, very difficult for them to wipe, I will say. They aren't going to have an insane amount of CDs whenever Devos comes back down, but Devos will come back down at around 15% HP, which there would have to be a calamity to occur from the Stiefbruders for them to not be able to kill off this boss with their Bloodlust. It has been popped, and now you do see that resonating arrow. Every other button is being pressed. Press all of your damage abilities, Devos will die in just a moment's time, as the Stiefbruders take this map and go up 2-0 over John's army.
That's right, Team Stiefbruders going to be moving on throughout the lower bracket, taking the victory and sending John's army home. And, you know, it looks like John's army was at least having some fun as well right there, Makes. You know, they really wanted to go up against Echo and against Shinji themselves, but unfortunately couldn't quite make it.
Absolutely. So they came here with, you know, big ambitions and big dreams, and sadly